All right, we'll go ahead and get started. All right, guys. We're having Council Town Hall with the new sitting council and previous. We have Blichter, Animositas, and Scoriox who just came on for this epoch. Diraji was already here. And Kieran, he's pretty beat up from the past few days, a very limited sleep for launch. But he said if we need him, we'll ping him. So with that, we can get started. Blichter has some topics already. The council has some topics already we're going to go over. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to raise your hand. And then I'll bring you guys up if it's relevant right then, or we'll have a Q&A session at the end as well. And if you don't feel like coming up and talking, you're welcome to chat down in general chat, and we'll have somebody watching the chat to pick up your questions there as well. So with that, we'll get started. Let's see here. First topic we're going to cover is runway, essentially. So you want to dive into that, Blichter?
Yeah. So just to make it clear, we kind of wanted to structure this in two parts. First part, we just want to share some information that we've kind of got the okay to share with the community. This is just from our first council meeting, so we just want to kind of be disseminating that back to the community. So on the topic of runway, quite a few questions have been asked about sort of how much stablecoin runway do we have, or whether or not we have a bunch of stablecoin runway that's not in the Treasury wallet that people have identified on the blockchain. The Treasury wallet on the blockchain that you can see is representative of about 90% of stablecoin runway at any point. So it is a fairly accurate way to track how much stablecoin runway we have at the moment. The reason it's 90%, not 100%, is because the team will pull portions of stablecoin out, and they'll be using that for payments and development costs. Next thing we wanted to share was withdrawals from the Treasury wallet have been inconsistent sizes. That's just to capitalize on favorable rates. So if you look over the last couple months, I think there was a 2-point-something billion dollar withdrawal maybe 2 months ago, and then this previous month it was 1.3 million. That's not necessarily representative of what's being spent in that given month. That just is indicative of what the rates are like for that month. So if you average that out over time, it should give you a fairly accurate idea of our stablecoin burn rate. Aside from that, as far as some incoming revenue sources go, I think everybody's aware that Illuvitars are coming up in the relatively near future, so that will be a revenue source that we can leverage to extend the runway. We've also discussed some potential IP collaborations. We don't have a ton of information about specifically what those will be, and it's probable that we can't share what those will be. But just so that people are aware that those are an incoming revenue source that should be starting relatively soon. Aside from those sources of normal revenue, which is not drawing any additional revenue towards the treasury, we also have identified the following options to extend runway, and for most of these, we already have IAPs prepared to implement them. We've kind of been reviewing them and trying to figure out a priority list. That's still something that we're determining. We do have a meeting with Danny coming up on December 20th, and we really want his perspective and his guidance on what he views as sort of the best options and the highest priorities, and also his perspective on the urgency of implementing those options. So I'll hand it over to maybe Diraji. Do you want to talk about the options?
Yeah, sure. I can talk that. Real quick, Crystal asked a question in general, what the stablecoin is held in, and it is USDC. So where are we at in the... Sorry, I wasn't prepared with where we were at in the talk sheet here.
Basically, we were talking about the other runway extending options we have. We spoke about a few different levers we could pull, and that's where we were at essentially.
Yeah, and maybe the priority list listed out. I was trying to find that real quick.
I just reposted it at the bottom of our town hall communication thread.
Perfect. Yeah, so Blichter just mentioned IP partnerships as one of the upcoming revenue streams. We have Illuvitars coming up as another revenue stream, and I know that's been talked about a lot of what to do with that revenue. There is also the option of withdrawing the liquidity from the sushi pool, and the option then of potentially keeping the ILV and adding that to Treasury and selling the ETH. As of right now, that's about $3 million worth of ETH that is currently there. There's also potential of adjustment for future sales, and then my least favorite is the sale of the Treasury, and so doing a further use. And so those are just a number of different options that we have. And again, we have the opportunity to talk that with Danny a little bit further here next week.
I think it's also worth mentioning that you guys were talking about like proactively having these things ready. I don't know if you guys want to speak to that more, but yeah, I guess a lot of that hinges on your conversation with Danny. But
yes, and maybe I can jump in here at this point, Rich. The main feedback that I think is important for the community here is that we have a pretty good situation, all things considered. When you look at the broader market, when you look at the overall runway of the team, many of you that are listening to this are either probably playing in the overworld right now, or you're going to be even listening to the recording because you're unwilling to leave now that we just had the reset of the fuel. So in general, you can see that we're also approaching the stage where we will be able to get gameplay out here in the coming months and have the actual game launch with revenue. So the real important question that we as a council, as the team, as the community need to understand is what of these levers are really necessary to be pulled, and what's the right timing for us to do so on any of them. And so that's the important thing, more important than any of the other IAPs that are out there, more important than any of the discussions around titles and game launches and council compensation and spider IAPs and so on, is this question: what do we need to make sure we're doing to ensure the team has stability for the long haul? And so this was, I would say, the number one discussion point. We spent the most time doing research, looking into it, and then, as mentioned, this was our first request to have Danny come in the next council meeting to talk through it. So our intention is that we will be sharing any of the IAPs as soon as we get some more transparency, and we have the internal view, as we just shared, on preference of ordering for leveraging some of these options. But of course, we're going to be aligning with the community on feedback for the different points. I think in general, we have a fairly consistent view on most of these topics. There may be minor adjustments up and down, for an individual item for a team member on the council. However, we're all pretty aligned on the priority. So in general, the question is going to be, what, from a dollar standpoint, do we think we're able to get back from each of these levers if we pull them? What is it that we need to be ensuring that we add to the treasury for runway purposes? And then, avoiding anything else that isn't going to prove to be necessary before we have game revenue coming in.
Really quickly, I want to build on that too. Oh, go ahead, Scorius. You haven't talked.
I was just going to say, just to add to that, is like, this is particularly hard because a lot of these levers, especially things like Illuvitars RevDiz, being distributed to the treasury instead of stakers, is not something that's easily unpulled, so to speak. So like, yeah, it's very hard to go back on some of these things, and we don't want to set a precedent for anything, especially if unnecessary. But the really big concern, and we are aware that it's not so much if we're going to survive, because I think there's some general confidence, even amongst the community and things like that, that we should really be fine. I mean, there's actually a decent amount of runway and so on, but the big concern is really things like job security and confidence in the overall team, community, and so on. So we are making sure they're measured concerns and making sure we're really measuring what is the best move, if at all. And we're preparing for that anyway. So we've got a lot of IIPs that we're drafting up and things like that, ready to go if we need them and stuff as well. So we're not just like sitting on our hands and just ignoring the situation altogether, that's for sure.
That actually touches on exactly what I was going to say. I've been super impressed with these three so far of proactivity and the amount of work that's getting done ahead of time on drafting IIPs, having these discussions in advance. And so it's a more proactive approach. Is one of the things that we've seen over the past couple months is how quickly things can change in the space. And if we're just then having debates of what to do, if we were to talk like the sushi liquidity pool, like the next day or a couple of days later, things can change dramatically and we need to be ready to act quickly. And so having those IIPs prepared, having the discussions in advance and being able to react very quickly is something that I'm excited about that this group is doing already.
Yeah, definitely. I think you guys have been great since we started. I mean, we've even had supplemental meetings, and you guys are definitely taking the forward approach to making sure everything goes well. And it's been a big help for Kieran as well. He's a pretty busy guy, so I think it's very helpful. Let me see here. I thought I had somebody with a question. No, not there. Yeah. So, does anybody have any questions regarding Runway? If you want to come up and ask anything that they didn't cover, you're welcome to come up now. We have somebody that wants to come up. Not sure if I want to bring him up, honestly, but we'll go ahead and give him a shot. This is Jim Barino.
I almost declined after that little comment, but this actually might be a super stupid question, but what can we as like, is there anything we as like normal people in the living community can do to like help Runway? Is there any, like, even if it's small?
Honestly, if there's anything that I can think of off the top of my head, the big one is keep proposing ideas, right? Like, we're just 5 people here, and although we're all very, very invested and heavily dedicated to making Illuvium better, I mean, 100 or even 1,000 people can always put forward ideas that we might not have thought of, right? There's always something that we haven't thought of. I'm sure of that, and that's just the reality of the situation. But like, even things like, if we've missed, maybe we talked about IP, we talked about liquidity pool and everything. If there's a revenue stream that we might have missed or an idea, for example, a good idea that someone put forward the other day was like a toggle. Obviously, we decided it maybe is not super practical, but it was actually a really neat idea where you have like a toggle on your dashboard and you'd be like, I don't want to receive rev divs because I want to help out the DAO. And obviously we wouldn't implement something like that specifically, but that was a great idea, and there might be more ideas like that that could really help us out. So just, yeah, keep feeding ideas and things to us, and it'll give us more to talk about and more to really delve into. And the deeper we get, maybe we'll get a solution that's even better than what we've already come up with. There's always that realistic possibility, right?
Yeah, just to elaborate on that, just participation in governance processes is really important. If there are ideas, or if there's IPs that have been proposed, just providing your feedback, regardless of whether your feedback is in favor of an IIP or against it. Just having that dialogue back and forth, trying to poke holes into proposals to make sure that they can stand up to a bit of scrutiny. It's actually really important, because it only takes one person to identify something that could be wrong with a proposal. So, yeah, just participation and being engaged is incredibly helpful as well.
I would just say take advantage of the moment with Overworld coming out, and this is all about mainstream adoption. And so bringing other friends to the community, showing them the product. And I really think this product and seeing Overworld, seeing the autobattler is something that is going to kind of shift people's perspective on what a blockchain game can be. And that really is where the funds to run the DAO come from long term.
Yeah, and for you specifically, Jim Barino, just keep being the face of Illuvium. Bring the people in, and that's what we need.
Oh man,
That was the correct answer. Thank you, sir.
that's all he
Yes,
wanted
absolutely.
to hear. You know, that's why he came up here.
Yeah, thank you so much.
That's why I waited till the end.
Love it.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Jimbo.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah. Looks like we got Vetamore over here.
Oh, Rich, I think Annie's just going to cover the rest of our topics. It's just a little bit on GovV2.
Okay.
Now we can go
Yeah,
pure
yeah, that's
Q&A
fine.
for the rest of the meeting.
That's fine. You want to go into GovV2 then, Annie?
Yeah, we can bring anyone on stage that wanted to hop on real quick, and then once that's done, I'll jump in.
Okay. Yeah, I just figured because we were on this topic, we could just cover the questions here, and then we would move to GovV2, and then move on from there to any questions.
Yep.
You know.
Yeah, that's
while
perfect.
they're fresh in people's minds. Come on up here, Vetamore. You got to hit a button. Come on, Vetamore. Doesn't know how to use Discord. There he goes.
Okay, I figured it out. Okay.
Previous council
I just
member
wanted
Vetamore.
I just wanted to ask what the four of your stances are on actually potentially either utilizing obviously the money that would be raised by Illuvitars or some of the money that's already been raised through like trading fees and stuff. Just where the four of you stand on that generally, like on that topic.
I can go ahead and start on this. We've talked about it a bunch. My personal preference, and this is something I really appreciate about this council, is that we can not necessarily agree on specific points, but we can still have productive discussion. My initial take was that the community was in favor of potentially taking as much as like 100% of Illuvitar's revenue, putting it towards runway. I'm fairly conservative fiscally. I do see potential scenarios where this next year the macroeconomics are not great, and I kind of want to err on the side of risk management. But some really good points were raised, and some alternative solutions were raised as well that could potentially have the benefit of not needing to jump the gun and use 100% of the Illuvitar's revenue immediately, and potentially just hold it in the vault, and then assess whether we need it or not. And if we do need it for runway, then we could have it available. And if we don't need it, then it can get distributed as normal rev dis. But again, we are waiting for a meeting with Danny on December 20th, and so we do really want his perspective to make a final decision on that.
Yeah, so maybe I'll hop in here next. It's a great question, Vet. My personal if at all possible, avoiding the RevDis structure. For me, it's not a holy grail or some sort, or a sacred cow or whatever that we can't touch. However, it is something that is impossible to undo once you've made a change to the structure. And so I've been, I think pretty vocal in the community, both before and also in the council afterwards, that if it proves to be necessary after we have the discussions with Annie and we're convinced that this is let's say the only way that makes sense, then I'm not opposed to it in that situation. But for me, the preference is instead beginning with something like the partnerships. I had shared that this is a vision I had, and after some discussions we had with Kieran, I think he also had some ideas in that direction. So I have an IAP, and pending the discussion with Danny, I'll release it for feedback from the community about leveraging some potential partnerships that we could establish. We won't be talking about specific brands and companies, obviously due to NDAs that we might have with them, but basically leveraging the IP that Illuvium has, where advantageous to us in a way that keeps our brand positioning where it needs to be, in a way that might allow those partnerships to be funding the treasury directly. So I think the way that I worded this in the IP is, if we have a scenario where we're paying a third party for contract work, for service provisioning of some sort, all of those funds are coming directly from the treasury, right? There's no sort of share coming from the DAO itself or from Illuvium token holders. In the same way, IP and partnerships, I view this potentially as a little different than standard merchandise options, in-game sales, Illuvitar sales, and so on. And I think I would make the point that viewing this as such that the funding from partnerships should go directly to the treasury is a way that I think makes sense long term to help fund the project. And avoid impacting the rev structure. And so that personal preference out of all the options that we have. Secondarily, I would personally go with some of the liquidity withdrawals that might give us a little bit more runway, and only then, and after we obviously have exhausted any sort of normal sales of products, merchandise, Illuvitars, and so on, would I then look at touching rev structures or anything like a capital raise? So that's my personal preference. I do recognize that people have different opinions on that, and as I think Blichter mentioned, we've had a lot of discussions, and I think people have moved. I've moved on some of these positions a bit from my initial thoughts based on the dialogues. And so I think we'll land in a good spot. And what I would just ask from the community is that certainly you give us your feedback, and then as we have the detailed dialogues with Danny and get the financial transparency, that you do give us an appropriate level of trust that we're going to make the right decisions with that additional information in mind.
Yeah, I guess I'll go now. Illuvitars, I can see that the community has been for it. I'd like to poll them again in more recent times as well, of course, but I can see that they're for it. So in that sense, I'm not going to crazy stand in the way of it or anything, but at the same time, it's very much a last resort for me. Similar to what Annie said, it's pretty much the one option we have, to me, where it's very hard to go back on it. And I say that for a number of reasons, but the big one is I see Illuvitars very much as the fourth game. Is pretty much the next game that's going to come out after the initial three. I definitely think there's so much potential there, and I think it's going to be, personally, I think it's going to be one of the bigger revenue generators. Obviously, we're not going to predict what it's going to do, but I don't want to put myself in a situation where we do all this stuff and start taking revenue from it and all the rest of it, and then it turns out it generates more revenue than anything else. There's been a lot of work behind the scenes put into Illuvitars, and I don't want to necessarily waste the potential of that, giving Illuvium an even bigger place in Web3. And I think things like the sushi liquidity pool, you can pull from it and you can add back to it, and it's not such a big deal. And the IP partnerships and things, I think, make a lot of sense in general, because they wouldn't really be a part of a system that goes straight to stakers anyways. They would go into the system and go to the stakers ideally, but they're a little bit more off to the side, and it makes a lot more sense to take it from things like that. So I'm for Illuvitars if we need it, but it's definitely one of my last resorts.
I think I'll come in on the other side of Blichter of being the most conservative here, and I really appreciate the number of ideas and the number of things that are coming out, but for me, it stands as these are potential revenue. And we actually have clear line of sight to how much we're generating in each of these avenues. I'm very hesitant to let any revenue go at the moment. And so even if that doesn't mean make it over of like we're going to say 100% of the Illuvitar revenue goes to the treasury, let's at least hold on to it in ETH or have the discussion of is it worth converting that to USDC temporarily until these other avenues pan out and we really see what we need as well as where all the sources are coming from through this kind of time of uncertainty.
Yeah, thanks, guys. I actually really like this idea of taking the revenue from whether it Illuvitars, trading fees from like secondary sales and all that, and just holding on to it, maybe converting it to USDC, but not using it as runway yet, just so that even like the team members that are maybe more concerned about runway or job security, they know that that's actually potentially there, but then first pursuing other like avenues of like revenue generation, but like having it as a safety net. That sounds like a really good idea. And then if we get to a point where, you know, it's blue skies once more, then we can just, you know, distribute that as was meant to be, and all is well. No, that sounds great. Thanks for answering the questions.
Cool. Thanks, Vedamore. All right. Well, we'll move on to governance V2 here. We'll start there, and then we'll have a little Q&A session at the end. So, yeah, you guys can post questions in general. We already got yours, Crystal, so we'll get to that in a minute. But we'll let Annie dive into governance V2 updates right here.
Yeah, thanks, Rich. So when we come to the point of Gov V2, I think every time I mention this now, I start to get a sense that there's a little bit of a cringe factor within the community because they've heard, hey, Gov V2 is coming. It's got a lot of solutions for governance structures, and just wait until it comes out. It's going to be fantastic. And I think all of those points are true. The piece that I'm sensing, and I feel it too, because I'm equally invested in this as I would say anyone in the community, is when are we going to finally see it? And the parallel piece that I've heard from the community, which I think is also fair, is, well, aren't you just expecting this to be pushed through quickly on a vote? If it's been in discussions for so long, why are you going to even be waiting for any community feedback on the key points coming? Right. I think those are the two main concerns that I've heard from the community on this. And I think they're fair criticisms to be shared. What I would say in regards to both of those, the first point is, in order to craft a structure like a true governance framework, or even like a tokenomics framework for a project like Illuvium, it really requires some pretty in-depth analyses and trade-offs between different elements. And you need to have a fundamental picture that's all working together for the system to be in balance, right? And so it's not really like a cafeteria style plan where it's, you know, choose this and that and we'll kind of throw it all together and hope that it sticks. You have to have an overarching approach and framework that you're building towards. What I think we have today is exactly that the bones and the structure that is in place in the current draft is very good. However, it's certainly the case that once we put it out for community feedback, we're going to see things that were missed. There are going to be individual aspects that the community is just not in favor of. Some topics that individuals are not going to be in favor of. And that's all perfect. That's what we're looking for when we're going to share the information. What we need to do first, before this comes out, is ensure that there is no major roadblock that the internal council at Illuvium sees with the proposal. And so once we have the final review, and I say final review, it's maybe the initial review is the better phrasing here. Once we have the initial review from Illuvium's internal council and some feedback on any key major considerations, we will be putting it out for the community. And so our intention is to have this available shortly after the next council meeting. We have had this in as a request, and my hope is that we will be able to fully release the draft. As long as there are no major concerns that come up in that review, we should be good to go, and you'll see it within the next, let's say, week and a half for feedback and commentary. If there is something that comes out as a major concern, I think everyone in the community can understand and would support our position that we should take a look at that, because obviously compliance with regulatory guidelines is not something that we're going to outsource to community sentiment. That's why we have attorneys in the process. And so making sure that we take any major pieces of feedback into account and adjust the IEP proposal to accommodate those would be, of course, essential. Secondly, once we have the IEP out into the community, we really do expect to see some great community feedback. And this is a situation where I expect the IEP to undergo another 10 or 12 core revisions to it once we get it out in the hands of the hundreds of people that are involved in community governance within Illuvium. So my expectation is not that this is throw the IEP out and everything just flows through and gets voted on within a week. We anticipate there's going to be several weeks of commentary and feedback. I'm sure we're going to have multiple threads that are going on for different elements of the IEP, and we expect the community to be weighing in with their sentiments. We'll make a number of changes along the way, and at the end, my belief is that we'll have, frankly, the best governance structure among any Web3 game, and it's not going to be close, right? And so that's the goal that we're working towards. To do that, it requires a fair amount of time, and I think the community has been good thus far, giving us that flexibility to begin building that framework and work through these additional details. From a structure standpoint, I think most people have already heard some of the main ideas, that there would be sub-councils, that you would have team members that are included in each of the sub-councils for transparency on the development times and on implementation possibility of different ideas and so forth. What I would say is just keep those topics in mind, and once we get it out, give it a fair shot as you read through the entirety of the IEP. And then, maybe just give it a day and think about it, and then come back the next day with any questions or feedback or concerns that you've got, and really look forward to engaging with the community. We've got some explainer content in terms of videos and addendum guides to help with understanding and following the rationale for some of the points. And I know that I and the rest of the council and the folks that have been involved in drafting the document to this point will be happy to either jump on our YouTube channels or in Discord or on Twitter, wherever the case may be that you want to engage with us to talk through all those details in the future.
Awesome. Taraji, Blichter, you guys got anything? Scoriox?
Now, listening to Annie speak makes me want to go take a speaking course. I couldn't have put it better.
He is good. Very linguistically good. Scoriox, did you have something to say?
I didn't really have anything to add. I just wanted to say that, he put it really well. And I'm excited to share it with everyone. I feel like it's important for everyone to see it. And it's a shame it's taken so long to get some of that clarity and things like that. But I think we've all been pretty consistent in discussions that, we can't wait forever for legal counsel and all that sort of stuff to take effect, because we just don't know how long that will take. People can tell us how long they think it'll take and things like that, but it seems to never pan out in my short experience. But So we're going to share it with everyone, but it does need to be extra clear that it's always subject to change, and things that aren't in the community or in our control could also affect and change it. So.
Yeah, and maybe I don't want to put too fine a point on it, but to provide some more details on what Scorax mentioned, there's two different elements that we're talking about with the delay, right? One is legal guidance, and that's what we're we're willing to wait on, because that's exactly the reason that we have attorneys on retainer with Illuvium. The second point is regulatory clarity, and that's the point that I think we're not frankly willing to wait on, because there's no clear pathway. We've got so many jurisdictions that would be involved in potential regulatory topics, obviously starting with Australia, but then working outward. The second point is there's no timeline that we could depend on for any governmental body, regulatory agency to provide full transparency. Even when we get to the point that there's a particular bill or law or statement, guidance letter from any governing body, all of those are going to be subject to court challenges that would take, frankly, years to go through and to give us the level of transparency that we need. So we're not waiting on any sort of regulatory clarity to come, because that's, frankly, a fool's game in a space as early as Web3. But we are willing to wait to ensure that we have the legal guidance from within the Illuvium team before we move forward.
Awesome. Yep, it's been a while, but I mean, we've had, I don't know, I remember exactly how many people have edited that document, or at least gave me their comments to edit it, but it's definitely looking forward to getting it in everyone's hands for sure. You guys want to add any more? Should we bring Artemis up?
Let's do some questions.
Yep.
Okay. Welcome, Artemis. Good to see you.
Just a quick, simple question for me. In preparation for feedback from the community in regards to GovV2, you mentioned creating threads for all the different conversations that are going to happen, but have you guys thought more of like who's going to be organizing and leading that, so that we don't have the conversation happening in like 7 different, channels within Discord? Like a place where it's like, hey, go here to start a thread or go here to check a thread. Is there going to be somebody in charge of funneling that?
I'm trying to unmute myself. Yeah, I can answer that. It's going to be me mostly. And not only me, but, I have help from the community moderators and stuff. But we are, and I was going to bring this up in this whole chat, but we are planning on moving to governance forums. And we've been talking about this for a while, and I think it even got approved at some point. But yeah, basically we have Collabland bot in the server already, and so we plan to be implementing it. It'll read, if you're holding ILV, so if you want to participate in governance chats, then you'll need to verify your holdings, so that we don't have these dissenters that like to derail topics often, I would say. Or at least they can still do it, but they need to verify that they're actually, able to participate in governance. And it's not there'll be more details with like how all that's going to come about. Like everybody will be able to read it. It's just, if you want to chat and participate, you need to verify that you're actually holding ILV at least, and possibly staking. It's not all solid decided on yet. But with that said, that'll have the forums system, which we kind of use for ideas now, and a couple other things. But it'll be a lot easier to organize discussions that way and point people to the right thread and where they should be talking about what. And so we've been working to get that system right. And with Collabland, it has to pass security reviews, and then now we're at a place where we think it's good, but we wanted to wait for the election because we didn't want people to, suddenly have this big change as soon as the election came about. So, yeah, I think we're going to be waiting until maybe the new year to implement the actual forum. And with that as well, like you were saying, I think your question was about community sentiment also in the chat. Yeah, I got approval I made a community snapshot. Basically, it's just like our snapshot we use for council voting, and I had Pedro make me the same VILV that we just switched over to, which is to make sure your wallet has staked ILV or SLP. And so this would be the same VILV as that, but it would include holders' wallets. So it's just a little bit different, and we can use that for community sentiment votes. You know, if somebody's a holder, we could use either, really. It doesn't matter. You can change it on the fly in Snapshot. But we can definitely make a more a bigger push to put these governance topics out there to make sure we're getting as much people voting with the sentiment. And it'll be clear that like this is just a sentiment vote to help the council decide on how they want to vote on things, you know, because I think that's been a big complaint or concern that, you know, it's not getting to enough people that it matters, you know. To me, it'll be a good thing to get more sentiment, you know, for people that might not be paying attention every day. You know, we have a Telegram. Some people might not even use Discord or Telegram. You know, they might only follow us on Twitter and YouTube. I hear it a lot, so it'll be good to get these different avenues out.
Awesome. And I do have one more question while I'm up here.
Go for it.
Because, you know, obviously we have several weeks of feedback for GovV2, and then once GovV2 is passed, there's probably going to be a couple more weeks to implement everything. For current IIPs that are in the process, I heard that they were being recorded somewhere in terms of like, hey, here are all the IIPs that have been suggested. Here's where they're at in the pipeline. And I was just wondering if that document is going to be made public so that people can, like, if they want to check in on the progress of an IIP, they can just like have view access to a document and say, oh, this one is here. And then if they have further questions about why it might not be moving forward, they can contact a council member.
Yes.
Unless I'm mistaken.
So with I mean, there's a few things there. Like with the DAO Dash, like I had a meeting with the team that's, you know, making the DAO dashboard, and that was one of the things I included in there. Like we need an area where like all of these IIPs that are either implemented or going to be implemented, you know, or even failed really for that matter. I think it's good that people see what's there, you know, and I think we can implement this easily with the forum structure. Like we can have an area where like, hey, this is the way it looks in my head, at least, you know, like where it's going to have like proposals that are active, you know, done, failed proposals, you know, or like we can organize it in a way that, yes, everybody can see what's going on. I think just currently, or the structure that it's been, there wasn't much room to put, like, Jeremy has full control of the Discord now, is what I'll say. So we have a lot more options. Jeremy's great. He's a huge help. Like, we talk through everything that we're going to do, and he comes up with a great idea of how we can implement it, you know. So I will say, like, I'm open to feedback, but it's like once we get this forum thing set up, I think you'll see a major improvement in the way we're tracking governance things and, you know, organizing them essentially.
Awesome. Thanks for that.
Yep. Okay, let's see. Or did you guys have anything to say to Artemis? I don't know. I don't know if that question was directed at only me, but I know I had answers for it.
Rich the sixth council member.
I am not a council member. My opinion here doesn't matter. I mean,
just in the interest of transparency, I think it is important to point out that in a lot of ways, Rich is our main line into the Discord management side of things, and a lot of the ways that we can gather feedback from the community are related to Discord management. Even something like just setting up this town hall is not something that a council member can just decide to do. It needs to go through Discord, right? So it needs to be set up by Rich. It needs to be scheduled with other events that could potentially be ongoing. Ideally, we would want to work around stuff like Overworld beta being out, because obviously people are busy playing that, and that makes sense. But yeah, as far as I just wanted to speak to Artemis's one question about gathering feedback from people outside of the Discord community specifically. We've talked about this a fair bit, and I think sort of the best we can do is just making the discussions that are happening in Discord more visible to the outside. So if that means things like ensuring that this council town hall ends up on YouTube, so that people from other communities that are not Discord can share a link to it and be like, hey, this is what's going on with Illuvium's governance right now. I think it's really important in that regard. The reality is that most of our governance discussions do currently happen on Discord. So if people wanted to participate, I don't see like a super effective way to have them be represented if they're not willing to engage with Discord at all. But we can at least be getting the information out there. Yeah, I guess that's all I wanted to say on that.
And with that, I mean, I will say, Taryn TSG down there, he was very helpful, and he made a push, because I kind of originally made a push for it, but things get busy and things get pushed back. But we did set up that Illuvium Plus channel, which is a supplemental Illuvium channel, where we're putting town halls and where we can now push governance related things. Like I said, I'm recording this, so this will be uploaded to there. I fixed my sound, Taryn, don't worry. My mic should be recording very nicely now. So yeah, I mean, we're making a concerted effort to definitely push and make people more known about all these governance related things. Anybody else?
Yeah, and sorry, I'll just build on one of the points that was mentioned. I think from a community standpoint, it's really important that we all recognize there are currently 3 primary stakeholders that are involved in governance topics today. And I view that as the community, which is frankly comprised almost exclusively of investors, and at least the ones that are actively involved in governance are 100% investors by virtue of holding Illuvium tokens. The second group is the council, obviously, and then the third group is the team, the project's developers and the founders and so forth. And it's really critical today that all 3 of those are working well and in tandem, that whether it's the communication. So exactly, that's why I love the question from Artemis, and we had chatted some in advance about making sure that we have good transparency for governance processes. It's essential that all 3 of those stakeholder groups recognize and understand and have the transparency for what's going on with governance. The key point we need to keep in mind, and I think this topic came up in some of the dialogue that I saw in general chat around Governance V2, is we're preparing Governance V2 when we now have a 4th group that's involved in governance. And that group does not exist today. And it's really, really critical that we understand that all of a sudden we go from what today is a fairly small number of relationships with the groups, because essentially it's the community to the council, the community to the team, and the team to the council. Now when you add another group, instead of having just those simple number of 3 relationships, all of a sudden it grows exponentially. And so that 4th group is the gamer group, which I know many of you that are here or listening are playing the overworld. But if we're successful, we're going to onboard hundreds of thousands of gamers that have no interest in IOV token holding in terms of the governance structure, and yet they're wildly interested in the success of the ecosystem. And so we need to ensure that the processes that we put in place are sustainable to handle the volume of feedback that we're going to get from a massive gaming community here in relatively short order. And so, I think when we talk about wanting to start off on really the right foot with this council for voting on individual topics, that's the perspective that we're taking, is not what's right for us in December of 2022. It's what's going to be right for us in the summer of 2023 and in the end of 2023 that we need to have in place so that this entire framework can be functional and we don't have major growing pains at that point in time.
Awesome. Thanks, Annie. And yeah, one other thing I forgot. Just a small thing on what Artemis was asking about and me talking about governance forums. But like I said, with Collabland, it'll be a lot easier to push to Discord people. Because I feel like, yes, like you could just make an announcement, and say tag everyone, and then we get a bunch of people here, right? But I don't think those people necessarily all actively engage in governance or even hold the token. So like I said, with that Collabland bot, we'll be able to have a governance role which people can opt into they would opt into if they're holding and staking ILV. And then we can ping those people, the people that do care about governance related topics, for all these governance related things, instead of getting a bunch of people that may or may not be interested, in governance topics. So I just wanted to tag that on the end of that. But yeah, we can bring up Scrubba unless you guys got anything else. Scrubba-dub dad.
Nope, bring him up.
Barely missed out, Scrubba. How you doing? You're on mute, Scrubba.
Yeah.
There
Hey
you,
guys.
there you
Yeah.
go. You done with
I had to get lunch a
vacation?
while ago. Yeah, finally back. Running on 2 hours sleep.
Oh, there
Had
you
to
go.
download Overworld right away. Yeah, so honestly the question really revolving around governance too is that we've already noticed that an IAP is out sort of addressing one of the things that governance too is already tackling. And I'm pretty sure like there are a lot of things that are not being proposed until we get governance V2 draft out, just to try and make things more efficient. But I wanted to get the idea from the council members if you guys are looking to implement or at least propose some aspects of governance V2 while Gov V2 isn't being shared yet or hasn't is going to go through iterations and won't be able to be voted on until, as you guys said, probably months down the line.
I would say it's definitely in consideration, and you're seeing the proposal on council pay for exactly that reason, that it's going to stay as defined right now until we get to V2. We've had some discussions and made some improvements on it that hopefully tie the value of ILV long-term to the council's motivations by putting that long-term component in there. I think as we get that feedback from legal of what are the things that are fine, what are the things that are off limits that we can look at, are there other piecewise approach elements that we can bring in that are beneficial? Though I will say, I think Rich is doing a good job with the ideas, and we move into some of these other improvements. And it really becomes this kind of my answer to the previous question of like, what can the five of us handle? Like, what are the things that we can do? And I think we're already starting to see some saturation of, are we seeing everything from the community and engaged appropriately? And that enters into the compensation discussion as well. But short answer is absolutely, as we get that clarity from legal, let's look at what else we can do in the short term that doesn't take as much complication to get past.
Yeah, thanks, Raji. Anyone else, or is everyone in agreement?
Yeah,
Yeah,
largely
I
in
think-
agreement with
Yeah.
with a lot of what Garaji said. I will say council pay is an issue that I've pushed on pretty hard. It is something that I feel pretty strongly about, and so that may be a part of why it's going to a vote now. But I do think there's some really strong points for why we should address it immediately instead of waiting for GovV2. Primarily that, just so that we're super clear about what we're talking about right now, there is a proposal and ideas. The proposal, just the general overview of it, is that it reduces council pay to $4,000 a month, and it introduces a deferred component of council pay. that proposal is also retroactive to the start of the term. So because we do expect GovV2 discussions to take quite a while, because it is, I mean, it's a change to our governance structure. It's a big deal. Discussions are going to take a long time, like Annie mentioned earlier. No matter how long it takes for the community and the council and the team and everybody to give their feedback and reach consensus on a new structure, if we can get a proposal passed that reduces council pay in the short term, that just preserves the treasury in the long run. And it's worth mentioning that council, since IIP 25, council is being paid in ILV, so we're no longer impacting stablecoin runway with council pay, but the treasury's ILV holdings are, I mean, Raji's used this term before, and I think it's really appropriate, but it's the lifeblood of the DAO. If we take too much ILV out of the treasury, yeah, we're hurting our ability to sustain in the long term. And so, from my perspective, literally anything we can do to preserve the amount of ILV in the treasury is a desirable goal. So that's sort of a big part of the reason why I wanted to push for council pay now instead of just waiting on it. If that makes sense. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I was just going to add on to it and say that as I'm very much for anything that we can push through before GovV2 is pushed through in its entirety. I'm definitely going to be looking at that as closely as I can at every step of the way, especially as feedback comes from the community and so on as well. The big issue is, without showing everyone GovV2, it's a little bit hard to explain, but it's been clear when we went through the council nominations and all that sort of stuff, where we talked about GovV2 would essentially have to re-elect the council, right? So that should just kind of like explain to you the sheer scale of it as a proposal in general. And not that that means that you can't break it up into smaller components, but you get to this weird zone where even if you took 20% out of it, that 20% might also be the component that means you have to re-elect the council. And every time you do a piecemeal thing, you got to re-elect the council over and over. And I know that sounds a bit weird to explain it that way, but essentially, yeah, it's quite a large sweeping change, and doing as much of it in one go as we can is probably going to make the most sense, just technically. But we will be trying to, things like the council pay is a good example of, if there are things that don't really affect that whole re-electing side of stuff as much, then we're definitely going to try and put that through earlier, I think, given we get the feedback for it, right?
Thanks for the answer. So I think I got my what I wanted to bring up with this discussion. Thank you again.
Cool. Thanks, Scrubba. All right. Well, did anybody else have any other questions you want to come up and ask? Or I think Vedamore, weren't you just in here for that question? I think Annie mentioned hopefully, as long as nothing too crazy. Vedamore's question was, when was Governance V2 proposal going to go public? And Annie mentioned that hopefully after the meeting on the 20th, we'll have all the feedback we need, unless there's anything unforeseen and major that comes up. But hopefully after the meeting on the 20th, we'll be able to get that out to people. So, anybody else with any questions? I think Blichter got his plug in there for the Council Pay IIP. It's worth checking out. It's down in Ideas Forum. I think it's one of the newest ones that's there currently. But definitely worth checking out and making your comments, either support, or if you have other suggestions on it.
You guys can't tell if it's just me, Rich, but I think you might have been roboting out there a little bit.
Oh, was I?
Yeah, I was wondering if it was me too.
Okay. Yep, Rich, it's you. So maybe we'll give him a second to get his mic situation sorted out. In terms of any other topics, maybe I'll throw it open to my colleagues here. I know there were a few other points in terms of upcoming IAPs that we had talked through. Someone want to hop up and go through any of the other points while Rich gets his mic back up?
Yeah.
We've already talked about it, but one of the ones I'm working on is just like setting up proposals for like stalling revenue distribution type thing. That's probably a bad way to put it, but essentially what we talked about before, and like holding the USDC in the treasury and whatnot, and then deciding later if we do or don't need it and things like that from Illuvitars, right? So those sorts of things is definitely something on my mind in particular, and I think we're at a pretty good consensus at the moment. Yep.
Yeah, I think I gleaned part of what Rich was trying to say there, but I think he was just plugging the idea of participating.
Yeah, can you guys hear me now?
Particularly in the IPs that are in. Oh, yeah, we can hear you now, Rich.
All right, yeah. We had a big storm here, so my I think something's going on. My internet's been rugging me pretty hard the past couple days. But yeah, I was just basically plugging your IIP and telling people to go down into the ideas, and I think it's one of the newer ideas. So check it out, comment on it, tell us how you feel about it, essentially, and it helps you guys. You know, you're part of the system. So that's all I was saying. But yeah, if nobody has any other questions, I think we can wrap it up here. We're going to be trying doing these quite a bit more often, at least once a month. We have a couple holidays coming up, at least here. I think all of us are in America except Skoriox. But yeah, we got Christmas coming. We got New Year's coming. So likely we'll have another town hall at the beginning of the year, next year. All good, guys? You guys have any last words? Annie, Blichter, Diraji, Skoriox?
No, all good.
Okay.
Thanks for joining, everyone, and thanks for participating in governance. It's really important, and it's one of the biggest drivers that pushes all of this forward.
Yep, I agree. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming.
Yeah, agreed. I was just going to echo that. Appreciate everyone that's here, whether you're still out in the overworld or you took a break to come join us. Thank you. This is important, and we've got a lot more coming up here in the short term. So we'll see you all in January.
Oh, yes, and this will be uploaded to our YouTube Plus channel. So, Illuvium Plus channel. That's what it's called. So.
And just real quick echo, thanks for everybody for hanging out. And I'll just want to thank my counterparts here of incredibly engaged council. If there's anything that you have questions on, the folks are really connected in Discord at this time. And so please take advantage of that. Ideas that you have, suggestions or feedback, we're definitely open for it.
Last thing also, I forgot to mention, I was going to mention, but if you don't know, currently there is a proposal up for vote. It is the Spider Illuvial IIP. So you can go check that out. It's in the proposals channel. So yeah, check it out. Council will be voting and leaving their thoughts afterwards. So, but yeah, we'll go ahead and get out of here. Thanks everyone for coming. Appreciate it.